I don't think that the sacrifice of a military spouse is fully appreciated and understood often by people outside of the military. And I think that sacrifice is made even more clear, and it's even more stark to me as a mom. Developing resiliency, developing strength to be able to tackle some of these challenges, these very unique challenges that not every family has to deal with, is it's a difficult and long process. And I think it's important for us to kind of normalize it's okay to feel this way.
They say when a baby is born, so is a mother. But while you are there to help your baby grow into the person he or she is meant to be, who is there to help you? Many women feel lost and alone when they become mothers, wondering, who am I now? Sometimes it feels like the transformation from woman to mother is as radical as a caterpillar's transformation into a butterfly. Did you know that inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar literally turns into goop before it rearranges itself into a butterfly? This podcast is about the goop, what soul transformation looks like as you transition from being a woman to a mom. Your baby's growth matters, but yours does too. You're not alone. I'm your host, Brittany Ming. Welcome to the Motherhood Metamorphosis.
Welcome everyone to this episode of the Motherhood Metamorphosis. I'm your host, Brittany Ming, and today we're talking to Emily Solberg. Emily is a writer, soldier, military spouse, mom of two, and fierce advocate of women supporting women. Woohoo! The goal of her writing is to help others feel less alone in their parenting journeys, and she isn't afraid to share the hard parts of her own. You can find her over on Facebook and Instagram at Shower Arguments with Emily Solberg. I love your page. I'm so happy you're here. So welcome, Emily.
Thank you, Brittany. It's a real honor to be here, and it's wonderful to chat with another military spouse.
Yes. So we were actually chatting before we started the episode, and I shared with you that I have been a military spouse for 5 years. So how long have you been a military spouse yourself? And also tell us about your participation in the military as well.
So my husband and I met in 2011, and he had been in since 2008. He was enlisted. He joined pretty much right after high school as a musician. He was a drummer in the United States Marine Drum and Bugle Corps. And we met when I was working on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. as a legislative aide. And I actually was kind of inspired to join myself. So I joined in 2013. We got married in 2015. And then, and we've been together, that entire time. And he has been in the service that entire time.
Okay, so what has your service been? Have you been active duty or reserved?
So I went straight into the reserves. I knew I wanted to stay in the area, and before we had gotten married, it would have been really difficult for us to be stationed together unless I was a reservist. So I was in the Army Reserves. He was active duty Marine. And of course, there was a lot of good-natured rivalry because of that.
Yes. Yeah, so we are an Air Force family, which people, like to call the chair force, in other branches. But it's all in good fun, right? Everybody pulls their weight and does their thing, and there's all the jokes that I hear about different branches too. So it's fun to hear those rivalries. Are you currently still serving, or are you taking a step back from that?
So because my husband decided to take the officer route, he went from enlisted to officer this last year. I decided to take a step back because I am also the mother of two young children, a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old. And I should say, made the decision that the kids and I were going to live in Indiana for a year while he completed basic officer training. And I just thought, that would be way too much to try to add a military commitment on top of my mom duties with a husband who was in full-time training for a year.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times making decisions about career or outside commitments, even like volunteering, oftentimes feels impossible when you add on the responsibilities of being a military spouse. So, can you maybe enlighten listeners about what it looks like to be a military spouse that people may not realize from looking from the outside?
So I wrote a post on my own page about this I think about a month or so ago, about how I don't think that the sacrifice of a military spouse is fully appreciated and understood often by people outside of the military.
Hmm.
And I think that sacrifice is made even more clear and it's even more stark to me as a mom. Once you have the addition of children in the picture and you're a caretaker and, not only a military spouse, but a parent. So I think that developing resiliency, developing strength to be able to tackle some of these challenges, these very unique challenges that not every family has to deal with, is it's a difficult and long process. And I think it's important for us to kind of normalize it's okay to feel this way. It's okay for this is what you know this is what it looks like to be a military family and to be a military mom and to be have a military marriage. And it doesn't look the same as what people I think envision. I think it's pretty widely understood that if you're a service member, obviously you're giving up a lot, right? But your family gives up, I would argue, just as much, if not more. I mean, I'm literally giving up another career. Granted, it's a part-time career, but another piece of service in order to help serve alongside him and in order to support him in his journey. And I feel like that's typical of so many spouses. Sometimes there's a negative stereotype, right? That we are dependents, right? We're dependas, dependopotamuses. There's all of these really negative stereotypes. And so rarely are they based on fact. I have met so many hardworking, ambitious, smart, talented, amazing spouses who would love to be pursuing their own careers, but because of the limitations of where they're stationed or what their husband or spouse is doing, they're unable to pursue those opportunities. So it's actually, I think it entails a lot more sacrifice than people understand.
Yeah. Let's talk about when you throw motherhood into that too, because your kids are 5 and 4, right? And so you guys had this maybe dual military careers going on, and then you had kids. So you were a spouse before and had those, the anticipation of supporting him before you had kids. But what does it look like since you've had children?
I mean, to be completely honest, it's been really hard because I feel like when you add children into the mix, there is more opportunity for resentment. Because when it was just the two of us, I could, to a certain extent, pursue what I wanted to. And then after we had kids, I think I kind of fell naturally into the default parent, the default spouse who was in charge of everything else. He had his job, but then there was the job of managing the household and taking care of the kids and figuring out how to make sure everybody was like fed and dressed and where they needed to go at the right time. And I feel like that's an emotion that doesn't get voiced very often either, is sometimes there's that resentment when you are the one who ends up doing a lot of it.
Yeah, I have felt that myself. And I think that there is like this shame surrounding resentment. It's like you're not being supportive, you're not being patriotic, you're not a good wife or spouse or even a good mom if you resent being the default parent. Because after all, like, didn't you want to be a mom? Like, didn't you want these things? Like, don't you want to be that good patriotic military spouse who's so strong? I think that a lot of times the stereotype of being a good military spouse is being like strong and unflappable, but also like silent.
Yes.
And I think
And
that,
selfless.
yeah, and just I have felt my own voice being taken away when I try to explain my experience of being a military spouse. Because even when I say things like, I know this is not everybody, this is me. Like, I don't like when people say thank you for your service. Like, it just really annoys me. I'm like, I'm not serving. I am married to him. My vow is to him. It's not to the military. And then people come back and they're like, "Oh no, no, no. You are serving. Like you need to realize like what you're doing." And in them actually telling me no, what you say is wrong. When I say, please don't say thank you for your service, and they're like, oh no, no, you should be appreciative of that. I feel like my experience is being stripped away by them saying you shouldn't feel that way. And I've tried to give people other options, like saying, I see your sacrifice. Even just asking the question, like, what's your experience been like? Because no
Yes.
one asks that. If you
Yes.
say, I'm a military spouse, and they say, thank you for your service, let the conversation ender, unless you want to be like the rude person who says, please don't say that. And then they argue with you about why you should be saying thank you for your service. And you're like, now I feel even more alone because you're not listening to me. You're not validating my feelings or my experience. And it's just like a conversation ender. It makes me feel so alone. So I'm like a big advocate for saying, hey, what's that been like for you? Like, tell me, like, what's that like? So I think people are curious about the military lifestyle, but they think they know what it is and they don't take the time to actually understand what it is actually like. So there's my rant on
One
that.
No, 100%. I think you nailed it. I think that was perfect.
I think women who are not military spouses can also relate to this idea of being the default parent. And I think there's a lot that's been written about emotional labor, or the mental load that women carry. And that's a real thing. Like being the one who knows how to put the baby to bed or the toddler to bed, being the one who keeps track of all the doctor's appointments, who always was the one to take off work, pick up the kids to go to the dentist, the one who shows up to the school programs, maybe because they're at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and your spouse can't take off work then. So being the default parent, it's like that's what we want to do to show up for our kids. But I think that what people have been starting to write about, that mental load, being the default parent, I think the resentment can creep in. And I think it's even more so when your spouse is committed to the military, because that comes with them being gone a lot. For TDYs, which are like a short period of time, anything less than 6 months is a TDY, or a deployment, which is 6 months or more. So I know for me, my husband was gone for 3 weeks earlier this year, and I am the one, when he's gone, I do everything. And he came back, and I was kind of resentful that he wasn't helping me put the kids to bed. But that hasn't been the pattern. Like he doesn't put the kids to bed, and he started doing it more. But he's actually going to be deploying later this year, and so he's like, "I want you to remember, I'm helping you out right now, and it's just going to get harder when I leave." And it's kind of we laugh about it, but I do appreciate that he puts the pull up on my daughter and fills up her water bottle and finds the blankie around the house that's lost every single night. Like those things help me out, but I have to realize those are the things I do all on my own when he's gone.
Exactly. And I think, and I mean, my husband's the same. It sounds like our husbands are the same in the sense that they are both, when they're here, they're very hands-on, right? They're always trying to help. They're trying to do whatever they can as fathers and husbands to kind of fill in that gap, that space that they leave when they do leave. But then the issue is, as you said, and this isn't a competition of who has it harder, or, but like being the default parent is hard no matter what situation you have, but they don't have a choice. There is so little accommodation. There's so little flexibility. It's like, no, this is the deadline. You have to be here at this time. There have been so many times where I would hope, okay, well, a kid's been throwing up all night. Can I sleep in a little bit? Can you go into work a little bit later? And there's just no flexibility on that, right? Like he has to be where he has to be, no exceptions. And that element, I think, makes it even more stressful. It makes it more disruptive to the family, and it makes it harder for them sometimes to transition mentally back and forth, because I think my husband is torn between his loyalty sometimes. Is it my loyalty to the Marine Corps first or my family first? And even though the Marine Corps will say, oh, it's family first, I feel like a lot of that is just talk. It's not,
Yeah.
I don't really feel like they actually follow through on that. And that, I mean, it's not, you can talk the talk, but not walk the walk.
Oh
So
my gosh, we have so many conversations about that. I say, like, the military will take and take and take and take unless you say, I'm not going to let it take. And sometimes, even when you say, I'm not going to let it take, it still takes.
it does.
And it's just like, it's like a black hole of commitment and responsibility. And my husband, we've had these conversations where he says, oh, it's family first. but we've really had to get to the nitty gritty. And he's had to say, if I'm going to say family first, I really have to make decisions that sets that boundary up. And the other day but there was another military spouse. I found out we were supposed to meet up. I never actually met her before. And she said, I can't come today. I'm not feeling very good. And she was like 36 weeks pregnant. And I'm like, okay.
Mm.
And I told her, I'm like, I really know how you feel. And then I thought, what would I need if I was 36 weeks pregnant and I had just moved somewhere? And I said, I'm going to bring you dinner tonight. And so
Oh,
I did. I made her casserole and I told my husband I'm making dinner for this mom, and her house was about 30 minutes away. And he said, "Okay, what time are you going to leave?" And I said 3, and he's like, "Okay, I'm going to come home and I'll drive with you." And I said, "Wow, like I didn't say this at the time because we were texting, but later when we were driving in the car, I'm like, I'm really surprised that you came home." And he's like, "Well, I want to support you in your efforts to find community and like make connection." The thing is, like, he had gone on in to work at 5 a.m. So by 3, like, he had worked a full day. And normally he works till about 5 o'clock. So, like, 5 to 5 is a typical day for him. And so he did come home, and I was just kind of surprised, but also really pleased that, okay, like, I can see that you're making these decisions to say, I'm going to support you in what you're doing, and I support another military spouse. And yes, I could have driven by myself, like that wasn't a big deal, but we actually got to spend time together during that time, and he knows I don't like to drive. So the fact that he came home was like a really supportive thing, because oh my gosh, the number of fights that we've had recently about the military and family commitments has been a lot. And so that's a reality, is just dealing with those dueling commitments because it's super hard.
right. And he could have, not everybody always knows that he's been there since 5 a.m. Trevor's mentioned that before, so if he leaves at 2 or 3, he could have gotten a few side eyes from people, are you really, are you skating? Are you getting out of there early? But he consciously made that decision. And Trevor's had found himself in that boat a few times as well, where he has, even just me saying, I really want you to come to this prenatal appointment with me, please, and I know it's a battle, because he's kind of thinking, okay, well, do I want to look bad, or do I want to leave that impression, with my command that I'm not available, or I'm not, hardworking. I don't know. It must be something like, I don't really have that. And I don't know. It seems like a very military specific thing too. I mean, I know that it's probably applicable to so many different jobs, but there just seems to be that level of guilt and responsibility and commitment, and it does feel like sometimes he's constantly between a rock and a hard place and trying to choose. So when he does make that choice to honor that commitment to family and put you first, that's really special and important. And I feel like that does take some time though to get there, and conversations, and sometimes fights, and it just takes so much communication as well
Mm.
between spouses.
Yeah. So let's talk about being a woman who is a military wife, a military spouse, and mom, and like seeking to honor yourself in the middle of this huge level of responsibility. And I just want to paint a picture really quick for somebody who maybe just, I mean, I think we've done a pretty good job, but my husband's going to be deployed. Actually, probably when this airs, he will be deployed. So a deployment for us is 6 months away from our family, and we won't be able to. I mean, there's no coming home. Like, he is gone for 6 months. I can't just go with him, even if he was deployed to a spot in the States. Like, there's no moving our family. It's just me being here with the kids, being responsible for all their schoolwork, all their emotional needs, all the doctor's appointments, all through the holidays, everything. It will be on my shoulders. So, part of me trying to, and I want to hear it from you because you guys just went through a year separated. How do you feel like you were able to maintain or strive for a sense of self as a woman? And
I mean, I'll be completely honest. I have been in therapy the whole time that we were apart. I knew before we even separated that was going to be something that I needed to do, because there was a lot of resentment. There was a lot of anger and bitterness, even though so our situation is slightly different because we chose to be apart so I could get support.
Mm.
because I also put and I was, a lot of people said, why would you ever split up voluntarily? The military separates you enough as it is. Well, that my decision actually to go out there was partly selfish though, because I knew that I would get support from my parents and from my sister that I wouldn't get from him because he was going to be in such an intensive and training environment. So even though he would be physically present with us some evenings, weekends mostly, um, we both decided that in the long run, there would be less resentment, less bitterness, less anger if I could get some more outside external support. And if he could have that time to really focus on what he was doing, because the stakes were high. He was determining, that training determined what his job was going to be. And so I went in with knowing I was going to be in therapy, knowing that I was going to have to lean really hard on my family and on other people. Um, and that was difficult for me. It was really difficult because I think asking for help is already a challenge as a mom. But that's kind of what I did. I had to ask for help. I had to work out a system in which I could still go to the gym. I could still write. I could still Zoom with friends and have like virtual happy hours or whatever, because I knew I needed to continue to fill my cup, even
Mm.
while it was being drained constantly from being basically a solo parent during that time.
Yeah. I really admire the wisdom that you guys, I mean, had the foresight to put in place. But I also see like that's so hard to be like, we're making a choice to be separated, our family for a year. And not to mention supporting your kids from being separated from their dad, which is not easy at all when they need that other parent in their lives. And, they cry and they miss daddy and, he misses them. Like that's so hard. But yeah, I I commend you for saying these are the things I need and knowing what you need and then being able to put the steps in place to do that. Because it's not always either people don't know what they need or you sometimes you do know what you need and you can't get it.
100%. 100%. And we are, I mean, that didn't, in some ways it was really good. I did get that support I needed. I do feel like my sense of self has been very strong. I feel very capable, very resilient, very um like I could just, if I can get through this, I can get through anything. But my marriage was, I think, very negatively impacted by that time apart. And we are now, we're in couples counseling now to kind of repair what was, I think, kind of the consequences of that choice. It hasn't been as hard, I think, with the kids and transitioning them back to being with, my husband, but even him stepping back into the role of a father has been somewhat challenging. I've been taking my oldest to speech therapy. I was the one who held their hands and walked them through that first year of preschool, which was still during a pandemic, by the way. We're doing all this stuff when the rest of the world is on fire.
Yeah.
So it just feels like it's, at one end or the other, you're still going to have to deal with the consequences of your decisions. And that's really hard too.
Yeah. I really appreciate you being honest about that because military marriage, I mean, there are scary stats out there about divorce. And it's so hard to be a supportive partner when you do feel like your spouse's job takes so much away from your family. And then when you feel like it takes so much away from you as a person. When my husband was deployed for the first time, we were living overseas and he deployed in May of 2020. So it was like,
Uh,
if you can imagine May of 2020
just imagine.
to the end of October 2020. And then we were just on lockdown after lockdown. And I just felt like in order to take care of my kids, I just had to shed like every single thing that I liked to do or that was keeping me sane. Cause like the only thing I could do was just try to keep my kids well and mentally sane. And I try to keep myself mentally sane too, but like like it was so hard. And when he got back, it took me a good 3 months to recover. And it was like recovering from an illness So if you can imagine having an illness and it taking you 3 months to get better from that illness, like that's what it felt like to try to recover from that deployment, where I felt like the baseline of I can do a creative project and it doesn't feel completely out of range for me. I can exercise 3 times a week and that doesn't feel completely out of range to me. Like that, I can sleep through the night without waking up 3 and 4 times, like having racing thoughts. Like that's what I mean by recovering from solo parenting. And granted, that was a really intense time, like deployment
Mhm.
through a pandemic, but
Mhm.
that was, I think that's what I did not have a sense of self. It was really, I had even tried, like, I tried to help myself, but sometimes you try to do these things and they don't work out. So I think that if any military spouse is listening to this and they're wondering why this is so hard or why it feels so hard, it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means that it's
Mhm.
that hard. And there are other military spouses who are going through the same thing and they're not feeling like they have permission to talk about it. Because there is that stereotype of the good military spouse is the one who smiles and is supportive and strong and silent. And I think it's so hard to tell our real stories about this because that stereotype to, is so strong.
100%. And I don't think people talk about that messy middle, which is what most of us find ourselves in as spouses, because, you either see the happy couple that's been reunited. They don't ever see what ends up happening after that. And then, they see the reunion videos of kids and wives jumping into their husband's arms, or they see the split up and the divorce. They don't see what happens sometimes in between when you're trying to figure out who you are in this marriage, when there's so much sacrifice and there's so much disruption and transition, and when you are dealing with stressors consistently that most people, the average couple, doesn't have to deal with. So I think normalizing this, putting names to feelings, me talking about couples therapy, you talking just about how losing that sense of self, it's so important for, I hope other military spouses can hear this, and I hope that they can speak up and tell their own stories, because it's just, I feel like loneliness is the other aspect of this. And we can talk about that too. Like,
Yes.
because
I
feeling
have,
alone is so hard in this life.
yeah, I have experienced loneliness like physical pain. And I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. It's not just like, oh, I'm feeling a little lonely today. Like, I'm like, my body hurts because I feel so alone. And it's hard to find people to talk to or to understand or to say. I shared that about the deployment with a new acquaintance, and she's like, "Well, I'm sure it'll all work. I'll be worth it in the end." And
Gosh.
I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I think I said, I don't know if I believe that. And I think I shocked her. I think what I meant by that was we don't know what the fallout is going to be from this. Like there are real feelings of dread about how this is going to affect our family and what it means to go through such a stressful time. And I didn't say any of that, but I did clap back a little bit to her kind of throwaway comment. And but that interaction just left me feeling like that's not somebody that is going to be a BFF for me. This new
Right.
acquaintance is not going to be somebody that I feel like I can connect with. And who knows if I'll interact with that person again. It was kind of a one off interaction. But I think that's the challenge of also trying to find people who are willing to listen and be supportive in ways that matter. I will say another neighbor I have actually said, she texted me and she asked when he was going to be deployed. And I told her, and she said, okay, I want to set up a meal train for you in the
Oh,
neighborhood. And she's like, is that, would you want to do that? And I said, definitely. And so that somebody actually taking the initiative to say, I see you, I'm going to do something that's tangibly helpful and I'm here for you, like that means everything as opposed to the whole, I'm sure everything will work out in the end.
right.
So that's like kind of the contrast of tangible help, supportive help, and people who want to placate with false positivity message about rough times that people might go through.
Right. I mean, that's actually one of the reasons. So we had not lived on base before. This is our first time living on base. And that was one of the reasons why we chose specifically to do that, was for the community. And because I knew I had spent a year, I have just, the last year. So I had the support of my family, but I didn't have other friends who were going through the same thing. And I definitely felt that ache, that loneliness of, I just want to be around other people that can relate and can understand. And so that definitely informed our decision to move on base. And I'm not sure if I'm going to have BFFs here yet, but it was really nice. We celebrated my daughter's 4th birthday on the 18th, which was literally like a week and a half after we came here. And we just picked up cupcakes at the commissary, and the neighbors, like, I sent out a message to neighbors and they showed up. We all just had cupcakes in our driveway. There were boxes piled up everywhere. Didn't know most people's first names, but it was a really nice feeling to feel like other people kind of got it, right? We didn't have time to plan a huge, big shindig. We didn't know anybody, but people still showed up for us. And I'm hoping to find more of that here as well.
I feel like that showing up is the most important thing for feeling supported. And I know that when I made that meal for that mom, I knew that that's what I would have wanted someone to do for me. And so it's like, sometimes if you want community, sometimes you have to take the first step to say, this is what I hope that people will do for me. And maybe it won't be at this station, but maybe it'll be in the future. So I really do believe, like, if you put good out in the world, like, it's going to come back to you. And I didn't do it because I think it's going to come back to me. Like, that's not the point. It's saying, like, I see a need, and if I can do something about it, I want to. So I think that's a message for spouses who maybe feel alone, to say, there's always a need you can fill. And if you are capable of doing it, you should, like, just jump in. It's not weird or awkward to be like, let me make you dinner tonight, because everybody needs to eat.
Yes. And I think that even extends beyond just the military spouse community, but maybe even just like the motherhood community, because there's so much inherent loneliness, I think, in motherhood. But I 100% agree. Just taking that first step, reaching out. If you are willing to put yourself out there, it requires bravery, it requires strength, but I've never regretted it. Have you ever regretted putting yourself out there and just at least extending a hand or sending the text or making that meal? I don't know. That's what gives me hope that ultimately we can be, better supporters of each other, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
stronger together, and better advocates for women and spouses. And, just, I feel like it just extends to everybody. And that's such a good thing to do for everyone, right? Everyone should just make that effort.
'Cause we all need support. I mean, our conversation has been focused a lot on our military spouse experience, but I think there's a lot of parallels between the struggles that we can go through being a military spouse and the struggles that you go through in being that new mom, that first 5 years of motherhood, where you feel like you're in the goop, you're in transition, you don't know who you are, you're needing support to figure out, how do I hold on to my sense of self? Like, who am I now as a woman, as I'm, transitioning into motherhood? And so, as we are thinking both about military spouses and about mothers, what do you think you would tell another woman about preserving her sense of self as she takes care of her family and strives for the good things she wants for both her kids and for her marriage?
So I think I would say it's never going to get easier, right? These transitions, these obstacles, the struggles, they're not going to go away, but you can increase your own personal resilience. And I think you can do that by opening up, by putting yourself out there, by finding something, no matter what it looks like, however small, that you need to fulfill your sense of purpose, whether that's writing, whether that's joining an online spouse group. I've gotten so much support from an online spouse group. The situation is never going to get easier. The transitions, the struggles, the obstacles that you have to overcome, they are always going to be there. They're inherent in motherhood, they're inherent in marriage, they're inherent in being a military spouse or a service member. But you can build your own resilience. You can be an advocate for yourself. And you can do that through community. You can do that through finding other people to help lift you up and support you. You can find that through ways in which you can support yourself and stay true to your own identity and do things that give you joy and give you happiness and peace. I feel like you just have to always stay true to yourself and trust your gut and take accountability for your own self-worth, because no one else can give that to you. But that's really what will get you through those hard times. And
Yeah.
that's what will keep you going, you know?
hmm Yeah, for me, going into this deployment, I realized that the stress, even just building up, is so difficult. We were talking about how the buildup sometimes is even worse than the deployment. And I'm in that place right now. And I had a checkup with my primary care provider. And I said, I think I need to get on an antidepressant. And I said, get back on one because I was on one about 5 years ago. And she said, okay. And so, do I think that I'm really in that place where depression is really getting to me? I was teetering on the edge, and I know that I need to support my emotional and mental health while he's gone. And so, getting on the antidepressant a few months before he leaves is trying to do the best I can to protect my mental health when I know that my system's going to be depleted. And so that was a choice that I'm making for preventative care because I know that I can't wait until I'm just so exhausted that I can't get out of bed to say, "Oh, I need to get help." I mean, sometimes you get to that point and you say you need to get help, but if I know that I'm already prone to anxiety and depression,
Yes.
taking the preventative care is what I need to do. And it's those appointments are always awful to be like, yeah, I
Ugh,
don't think I'm doing too good. Like, I don't know.
right.
I just hate that. And you never want to be like, I'm really struggling right now. Like, who wants to have that conversation with this almost stranger? But that's the example that I want to give to my kids. That's
Yes.
the woman I want to be to myself, and to say, okay, I'm going to make these choices to be the best woman and mom I can be to show up in this hard time. And it's going to be hard. Like, that's just the reality. But if I'm trying to do the best to take care of myself and making that commitment, that's how I'm going to get through it without feeling like I'm completely dissolving into that stress.
Exactly. I mean, it's that accountability to yourself. And it's really hard. And you know what, I just have such a hard time with these questions because I feel like sometimes it's, you hear the self-help gurus or whatever say, oh, you just take care of yourself, self-care. And I don't want it to sound like I'm coming off that way. But at the same time, I think there's a difference between self-care that is like I think preventative care is exactly how you described it. I think that's what we're talking about, not necessarily self-care, which I think could be in this like pie in the sky idea that's unattainable, but rather knowing yourself, knowing what your triggers are, knowing, just having a sense of how you're feeling, how you're going to feel, knowing, okay, well, I'm going to be in this position. This is going to make me feel this way. So what can I do now to put my tools in place or the resources in place to support myself when it all just descends on me, and not to keep my head above water. And I think that was just so perfectly expressed. So preventative care.
Preventative
I
care.
think that's good. Yes.
Yeah. I know that I read an article. You talked about the article you wrote. I read an article recently talking about if you're losing your temper as a mom, if you feel like you're constantly upset or angry or resentful, that doesn't mean that you lack the self control or the patience or the emotional awareness to mother your children. It often means that you need more support.
Yes.
And so you might need more childcare. You may need to talk to your spouse about saying, I need you to make sure you're home at 4:30 every single day because I have got to take some time to myself. It may be choosing to do that 15-minute yoga video every single day and just breathe It may be getting on an antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication. Like, support can look different in so many different ways. It may be like you making the choice to move in with your parents for a year because that is what you need. So
Mm,
instead of saying, I'm going to go it alone, but I know that my sense of patience, my ability to communicate kindly and effectively with my children, that's going to go down the drain or be significantly diminished because my stress level will be so high that I know that my knee jerk reaction will be to yell or to separate from them or not be emotionally connected. So it's not saying you just have to like muscle your way through to
right.
being this great mom if you realize the thing that I'm lacking is not self control or more patience, it's support.
Exactly. And it's not being selfish to ask for that support, to take it, to have those conversations, and to make choices like I did, where I know myself. I know not everybody would make that choice, but I know what I need. And ultimately, it was to my benefit, not just as a mom, as a woman, as a writer, as someone who needs that sense of worth, but also as a mother to my children. And I hope that they will always take that with them. I'm sure you feel the same way. You want your children to make sure that they are taking care of themselves, because it really is true. You can't take care of anyone else until you take care of yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Emily, this was such a good conversation. I hope that people will glean what they need to glean and just have really good food for thought about their own care, their own stress, whether they're a military spouse, whether they're a mom who is just in the thick of it. So, thanks so much for having this conversation with me today.
And thank you so much for having me on. It was so nice to talk to someone else who has been there and done that. And I will be thinking of you, and I'm sure talking to you frequently as you embark on this next transition for your family.
Yeah. So, I like to end our interviews with these rapid fire questions. So, are you ready for these?
Oh boy. Okay, here we go.
All right. Which Disney princess would you like to take out to coffee?
Belle.
She's my favorite too.
Say I actually insisted on being called Belle for like a year of my life when I was younger. So
That's hilarious. You're like, I am Belle. Like,
I
it's
am
not just a
Belle.
favorite.
No,
I am Belle.
she is me. I am her. Yes.
That's great. Would you rather spend a weekend at a cabin in the woods or in the city with great restaurants?
Cabin in the woods.
An ordinary moment that brings you great joy.
Reading with my toes in the sand on the beach.
Oh, I love that. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Last show you binged and loved.
Oh gosh. Schitt's Creek.
Schitt's Creek is so great. You can just watch it over and over again.
I know.
If you're going to pick a book, would it be fiction or nonfiction?
Fiction.
When you were 5 years old, what did you want to be when you grew up? Belle?
Probably that's probably Belle.
I love that. What are you looking forward to?
School starting.
Girl, same. Yes.
Same girl, same.
Finish this sentence. Motherhood is.
Exhilarating.
Oh, I like that. Where can we find you online, Emily?
You can find me on Facebook or Instagram at Shower Arguments.
And I hope you guys will check out her page because I love your writing and I love the community that you created. So thank you, Emily. I loved our conversation today.
Thanks, Brittany.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Motherhood Metamorphosis. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to this channel so you never miss an episode. Next, tell your friends. Podcasts are a slow growth type of social media, so promo works best when it's from person to person. If you know another mom who's in the goop right now, send her a text of encouragement and the link to the episode that is speaking to your heart right now. If you have a story about your own matrescence, the physical, emotional, hormonal, and social transition that occurs when someone becomes a mother, please leave a comment below. I want this channel to be a place where women can build community about the challenges and joys of their own motherhood metamorphosis. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope it encouraged you and gave you some good food for thought. If you ever have any questions, comments, or you'd like to reach out to me personally, you can email me at brittanyaming@gmail.com.
But several people reached out to me and said, I shared this in my spouse group, and it was really funny. I'm in a Marine officer's spouse group, and someone actually dropped the post in there, and they were like, "Oh, this is dead on. This is just exactly how I feel." And I was like, "Oh, I actually wrote that."
That's me. That's awesome. I love that.
Hold on just a second.
No worries.
Okay. Oh my, the cat. Okay. Get on out.
I didn't even realize you had kitties in here. Oh, he's like, nope.
I thought it was my kids, and it was the cat. Oh my gosh, can we edit that out?
Oh, sure. It'll be a good blooper.
Okay. I was like, I swear, Trevor, I was going to text him and be like, Trevor, where are you supposed to be watching the kids? It was the cat. Okay.